William Uri is one of the world's leading experts on negotiations. He's the co-founder of the Harvard Negotiation Project and author of a worldwide bestseller in 34 languages with over 12 million copies sold, the book titled Getting to Yes. The National Institute on Dispute Resolution calls it by far the most impactful book on negotiations. Uri has spent well over 3 decades as a negotiations advisor and mediator in conflicts across the globe, from boardrooms to ethnic wars and labor unions to government dealings, with heads of states and corporations. He has been with the White House Crisis Management Center and co-founded the International Negotiations Network with former President Jimmy Carter. Uri has also taught negotiations and mediation to tens of thousands of people from all walks of life. Trained as a social anthropologist at Harvard, Uri has carried out his research on negotiations not only in the boardrooms and the bargaining tables, but also among the Bushmen of Kalahari and clan warriors in New Guinea. The key to becoming a great negotiator, according to Uri, is first to understand that you are your worst enemy. So how can you prevent yourself from hijacking your own negotiations efforts? To know more, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome William Uri on our show today.
Glad to have you on the CEO show, William, and thank you so much for joining me.
It's my great pleasure, Nick.
Wonderful. You know, I'd hoped to have a conversation semi-structured with very specific ideas I wanted to get into, but after yesterday's debate, I thought, I cannot not bring Donald Trump into the conversation. His book was a bestseller, and supposedly it's about negotiations. If I had to hire Donald Trump to negotiate on my behalf, I would commit suicide first. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, my thoughts are, Donald Trump basically sees the world in very much zero-sum win-lose terms. And it's all about winning, and he hates being a loser, which is why he's reacting so much, because he realizes he's losing this election to a woman, and he's like, he can't believe it. And so that's why he's saying it's all rigged, because he sees his whole worldview is there's not enough to go around, and there are winners and losers, and I'm going to be a winner. And to me, my whole understanding of the world and the way the world is shaping and developing is that negotiation is about relationships, long-term relationships. Trust is incredibly important. It's not just about this deal, it's about all the future deals. That's where the real benefit comes from. And in that regards, the world is not zero-sum, it's positive-sum. We're able to expand the pie to make more for everyone if we can be creative, if we can negotiate with some integrity, if we can analyze and understand our interests, if we can understand the other side's interests, if we can be a little bit inventive, we can turn negotiation from a win-lose wrestling match into a situation where all sides can benefit through creative, hard-headed problem solving.
And I want to go into the depth of it, because I know you obviously have great depth in this on this topic. But for people's understanding, because whenever I have had conversations with people about win-win versus bare knuckles, I don't think they truly understand what win-win means.
Yeah.
Somehow they think that win-win means I'm willing to give and you willing to give. But what you're talking about is no, it could be that I could negotiate my way into greater value as opposed to just the one that I was thinking of.
That's it. It's not just about dividing up a fixed pie. It's about, can we expand the pie first and then divide it up so there's more for everyone.
Now, you said that take a long-term view instead of transactional. You start saying, well, I am the CEO of a company. This is a deal, but I am CEO of the company, hopefully for the long haul. And my job is to create greater value as opposed to just get this particular deal done. So is that why you talk about win-win?
Well, that's one, to me, fundamental structural aspect that makes win-win. In fact, I would even go further than win-win. I think it's win-win-win, and we can get into that in a moment. I think there's a third win in there, but which is a win for the larger whole, for the company, for the community, for the society, for the world, that needs to be taken into account. But the answer is yes, because look around and say, who are you negotiating with? Where are the, when I ask people, business people, for example, I ask them, okay, so who do you negotiate with in the course of your day? And they say, well, my spouse, my children, then there's, my boss, my board, my colleagues, my customers, my suppliers, my partners, my staff. I say, of all those negotiations, how many of them with people with whom you have an ongoing relationship? And they say, well, virtually all of them. So talking about win-lose is a little bit like asking who's winning your marriage. If you're asking that question, your marriage is in serious difficulty. Who's winning, you or your customer? I mean, if you're asking that question and that customer is a customer that's going to go for the long term, you're asking, who's winning, you or your business partner? It's you're bringing the wrong perspective to the situation. And if you can just change that mindset, then you can tap incredible amount of potential in any negotiation. At least that's been my experience. Even with, I'll give you just one example, if you like. A few years ago, I was asked by one of the wealthiest men in Brazil, he and his father started Latin America's largest retail chain. He was involved in a struggle with a business partner who was a French. They were both billionaires, but they were fighting, and they were literally spending tens of millions, if not more, every year fighting each other about control of this company. Lawyers, lawsuits, it was all over the papers. The Financial Times called it perhaps the biggest cross-continental boardroom showdown in recent history. I mean, it was everywhere. And so when I sat down with him, I said, just tell me one question. What do you really want?
Oh, that's a difficult one.
That's the hardest question to ask. What do you really want? And like a good business executive, he could rattle. He could say, well, okay, I want, $1 billion. I want the company headquarters. I want the elimination of the non-compete clause. He had a list. I want some real estate, whatever. He had about 6 things. I said, yeah, but what do you really want? In other words, what's behind all those things? I mean, you're a man who seems to have everything. He's got everything in the world. But what do you really want? And he was 76 at the time, and he was going to be chair of the board until he was 84 for another 8 years. And I said, what do you really want in your life? What do you most want in your life? And he finally, after a while, said, you know what I really want? I want my freedom. That's what I want. And this actually had particular resonance for him because he had been kidnapped 30 years before and held in a coffin for a week, not thinking he was going to survive. And so, when you're an executive, you like to control things. So you can imagine the experience. So he wanted his freedom. And I said, what do you want your freedom for? He said, well, it's freedom to spend time with my family. That's the most important thing in my life. And freedom to make business deals, which is what I love to do. So I said, okay, now that we know what your core interest is, that maybe I can help you with. And the result was we took this dispute, just to fast forward, when I met with the representative of the other side, who was a very distinguished French banker. He said, why are you here? And I said, because life is too short. That's why I'm here. Life is too short for these battles that were not only both sides were losing in terms of just what they were spending, the stress, but their families. 150,000 employees of the company had divided loyalties. It was straining relations, business, commercial relations between France and Brazil. What's it all for? He said, well, how would you resolve it? I said, if we could just agree on 2 simple principles, 2 simple basic interests that I think both men share, maybe we could reach agreement. He said, what are they? I said, well, one is freedom. They both want to be free, to move on, to do what they want to do. And the second is dignity. Everyone wants respect. They can't afford to be seen as losers in this situation. And it's not just, face. It's like no one wants to, they have dignity.
Yeah, this is an amazing example to start this conversation. And one of the things that I wanted to get into is I really, there's a lot of material that we've talked to different people, and I wanted to get into the newer sort of insights, which you obviously have. I just wanted to bring it out. some people tend to think that, you got to be aggressive and selfish and all that stuff in at the negotiating table. The perspective of what a negotiation is itself is myopic, to be more accurate. They think that sitting across table is the negotiation itself. And you tend to think that an aggressive person will tend to be a better negotiator. And what you're telling me is, no, calming down and looking at things more reasonably. It's almost like a new personality. I think you couldn't possibly train Donald Trump, send him to all the training classes on negotiation and make him a better negotiator. He won't. So is this about transforming the person to become a negotiator?
Fundamentally, in the end, I believe that given the difficult negotiations we all have to face every single day in business, in our personal life, in the world, what I've found is that the single biggest obstacle to us getting what we want in life, to us getting to yes with others on the things that we really care about, is actually not what we think it is. We think it's that difficult person, or that person in a difficult moment, and that difficult boss, that difficult partner, whatever it is. What I found is the single biggest obstacle to us getting what we want is right here. It's us. We are our own biggest opponent. That's the person we look at in the mirror every morning is the person who's to give us most trouble. And if we can learn to turn that person into our ally, if we can get out of our own way, if we can get our ego out of our own way, if we can focus on what we truly want, like my friend in that particular case where he found what he truly wanted was freedom, not to beat the other guy, he wanted freedom. Once we can do that, once we can get to yes with ourselves, it's going to be a lot easier to get to yes with others. And so it is that kind of transformation you're talking about.
Yeah, it's the peeling the onion, going into the depth and really identifying what is it that you truly want as opposed to what seems to be. And we don't realize the mind is actually a machine with lots of short circuits. And it just trips, and then you revert into a certain behavior pattern that you are not even thinking. And it leads you in a direction that you will say, why was I going there to begin with?
That's it. That's why, I mean, to me, the foundation of successful negotiation is the ability to deal with that, which is, there's a saying that when angry, you will make the best speech you will ever regret.
Right.
And that's what we do. We get into this reactive mode, and then we end up being our own worst enemy. Consider Trump. He's his own worst enemy.
Worst enemy, yeah.
He's defeating himself. It's not Hillary Clinton who's defeating him. He's defeating Donald Trump. Is defeating Donald Trump. And that's a large scale, but in a small scale, we're all doing that to ourselves. And so for me, the foundation of successful negotiation is the ability to step back from the situation. I like to use the metaphor of going to the balcony. It's almost like you're negotiating on a stage with the other side. Part of you goes to a mental or an emotional balcony overlooking that stage, which is a place of perspective, a place of calm, a place of clarity where you can keep your eyes on the prize. If we can learn to go to the balcony in this very busy, intense world where the cell phone is going off all the time, texts and emails and so many distractions, if we can keep a laser-like focus on what is truly important to us in those negotiations, we are much more likely to be successful.
There's a word in Sanskrit, which is part the Vedic Hindu, part Buddhist. It's called Sakshi, which basically means the observer.
The observer, exactly. That's it.
So you become your own observer, metacognitive. Go back to some place where you're seeing yourself engaging in a process, and you be the coach, be the guide. But you can't be if you're not seeing things. Buddhist Buddha called it the first 8 path, samagya drishti, which means balanced view.
That's
seeing things for what they really are, as opposed to what they appear to be. And
That's it, totally, Nick. And I mean, all this stuff, we're just giving new names for what are ancient tenets of wisdom that go back thousands of years in these traditions, like the Vedic tradition or like Buddhism.
Yeah.
And it's true. It's about a balanced view. It's about learning to observe yourself so
Yeah.
that you can then observe others. Or as, Lao Tzu, another great,
Yeah.
master of the same time, he said, power is not having power over others. It's mastery over yourself. If you can
Absolutely.
master
Yeah.
yourself, then you're
Yeah.
free in life, and you can, and the same thing is true in
Same
negotiation,
thing.
but it all starts with self-mastery.
Yeah.
And that
In
starts
fact,
with
somebody asked one of the yogis, I don't remember who, said they call you master. A Western person, when he came to the West, he says, they call you a master and you let them call you master. Well, who are you a master of? He said, me.
That's it.
And that's the classic.
Exactly it. And that's everything. Because if you can start from that, that's why, I mean, my most recent book was called Getting to Yes with Yourself and Other Worthy Opponents. And the idea is that it's the same thing. It's like, if we can learn to get to yes here, getting to yes with others is no problem. This is the real problem right
This is
here.
the real problem. And this stops you from seeing what's the true why in the, I like to call them partners rather than opponents in a negotiation. That paradigm has to change of negotiations, not opponents. It's collaborators, partners. You say, until unless you really know what they want, and they may not know it themselves.
That's it. That's absolutely it.
But if you can find out.
Nick, you're reminding me when you're saying partners, it reminded me of Abraham Lincoln. In the old days when we had truly great people as president, he was, caught as president during our most difficult, painful episode in American history, which is the Civil War. And towards the end of the Civil War, he was making a speech in the White House about how to heal the wounds of the nation after the war. And he was speaking sympathetically of the South, which was his, quote, opponent. And there was a patriot in the audience who said to him, "Mr. President, how dare you speak kindly of our enemies when you ought to be thinking of destroying them?" Lincoln looked at her for a moment and he said, "Madam, do I not destroy my enemy when I turn them into my friend?"
Amazing.
And that's what we're doing in negotiation, is we're destroying the opponent by turning them into our negotiating partner.
This is so amazing because basically what we're doing with the terrorists, and I'm not saying I know the answer at all, I'm nobody in this arena, but if you continue to fight them, they're going to come back again and again. The virus is not dead, but if you turn them into, somehow figure out a way to turn them into friends, that's when it'll change. And I don't know the answer to any of this, but I'm saying that, if you keep on fighting, you can keep fighting. This has been happening in Palestine, it's been happening in India and Pakistan, it's happening everywhere in the world.
That's it. And we haven't, you'd think, well, no, that's just totally naive, idealistic, and so on. But, I grew up, spent a lot of my childhood in Europe. France and Germany were the most bitter enemies. There was not a single family in France that hadn't lost a member of their family in a war with Germany. There were 3 wars over a period of 75 years, as you know. And now France and Germany, if anyone would imagine them going to war, I mean, it would be totally unthinkable that now, if the Germans want to go to France, they just go as tourists, or they buy a piece of a land or a house in France. I mean, they're the closest of allies. And so it is possible to do that. I've seen it happen. I was in South Africa during the transformation there. I've been to Northern Ireland during the transformation there between Catholics and Protestants. It is possible, and it's possible because it's already been done.
And for that, you have to come from a place of empathy. Nelson Mandela's truth and reconciliation, as opposed to apologizing.
Right.
I mean, what a master stroke.
That's it.
Because he could see what's going to be possible and bring the two people together. That was an amazing insight. But for that, you need to become a different person.
It
so
does.
My question to you: how does one do that?
Well, take Mandela for a moment. If you read his autobiography, you'll find that he learned a lot through adversity. He learned a lot by being in jail, in prison. He said what he learned in prison was he learned to master himself. He learned to observe himself. He cultivated precisely what the ancient Vedic scriptures suggest. he learned to observe himself. And in observing himself, he was able to master his emotions in the sense of his, he naturally had anger. I mean, after all, a grave injustice had been done to his people, to him. But he learned to master that and keep his eyes on the prize, what was most important. And the result was that in jail, what did he do? The first thing he did was he started to learn the language of his opponents, Afrikaans. He studied their history. He started to develop compassion for them, for their suffering. And by doing that, he was then better able to negotiate with them and to bring them to terms that were fair for everyone. And he did precisely that. Another great example of that was, of course, Gandhi, who also learned a lot in the jail cell. He'd always say, he would like to go to jail sometimes because he could actually be time to meditate and actually take some time. Gandhi was a great teacher of this too. So we can learn from these great human beings and to practice these same concepts ourselves of going to the balcony, putting ourselves in the shoes of others, looking for solutions that are not just good for one side, but for all sides. Those are things that have helped transform whole societies, and we can use them to transform our families, our business organizations, our relationships with our customers, and so on.
Right. And I believe, and help me where I'm wrong or help me understand it better, that even in a transactional negotiation, with oftentimes business people think of negotiations as such as maybe working with the VCs or partnership, mergers and acquisitions, and so on and so forth. Even in those transactional situations, the ability that you develop by being truly a relationship negotiator will help you because the skills that you develop in that process are truly helpful. And let me give you an example. I don't know how familiar you're with Marshall Rosenberg's work on communication, but I was having the hardest time with my 16-year-old. And that's when a friend suggested you learn about the NVC, and I studied it, and it is remarkable what it can do, that exercise, that process, because the brain works a certain way. And understanding of other people's brain processes and how people, what they like, what they don't like the Robert Cialdini's work on, the basic mental triggers. And whether you like it or not, even if you're aware of it, when it is incorporated on you, they work. 999 works. 75% sale works. It's not, but still it works. So when people like Mandela, for example, went and made the effort to understand what are the belief structures, what are the triggers of these people, that helps. So you train yourself, even in a transactional situation where they may not have too much of value creation potential, the value might exist just in making a person feel good.
Absolutely. That's it. And now, even in a purely transactional situation too, what I've noticed, I've worked with some of the world's best, great negotiators, whether it's in business or in politics or in diplomacy and law. I've had a chance to observe them. And interestingly, even though we think of negotiation sometimes in very transactional terms of, that kind of image of the negotiator, interestingly, the thing that these people value the most, even in a transactional negotiation, is their reputation. Their reputation, interestingly enough, for honesty and fair dealing. Now, why would that be? Because after all, surely you can, get a little bit more by not being quite so honest or not being quite so fair. But what they found, and actually scientific experiments actually prove this out, is that if you have that reputation, it's an incredible asset because people will open up to you. They're much more likely to share what the real problem is, what their real concerns are. You're much more likely to get to an optimal solution. And sure, in any one deal, you could take advantage, but it's like taking a reputation that will last your whole lifetime through thousands of deals and spending it on one deal. It makes no sense. So the thing, just like for a company, what's the most precious asset? It's its reputation with its clients and so on. So for a negotiator, what does a negotiator have? They have their word. How much is your word worth? What's your reputation for that? If you have that reputation, it can open all kinds of doors. And sure, you may not do quite as well in one deal as on another, but you will do so much better. You know, it was interesting. Go ahead, please.
No, and even within the same deal, what you just pointed out, that there is an icing on top of the cake. And those icing things could be the abstract contributions you can make into a person's life. Because ultimately, negotiation is about a feeling. You know, there's the cake, no doubt. But what does the cake make you feel?
That's it.
You know, if you can help people feel the way they want to feel, that's a huge value add.
It is. It is.
And so you got to understand what the person wants to feel.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I have a colleague, Adam Grant, who's written a book called Givers and Takers, and he teaches negotiation. And he's done all kinds of studies about, you know, those people who think the world's, you know, like Donald Trump, he's a classic taker. You know, it's everything about take. It's all about me. Take, take, take. And then there are the people who are the givers. And what's interesting is they've done all kinds of studies as a social psychologist. So they do all kinds of studies. And they find, for example, the most successful salespeople are not takers. They're givers who actually are not just doing it to get a little bit extra bonus. They're trying to create that feeling you're talking about, Nick. And the most successful, there are all kinds of examples where you, by giving, even if you don't get a direct return, you actually over the long term turn out to be much more successful than the people who are just looking to see how much can I extract from this individual situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And my favorite example, it's a little technical for some people perhaps, is regression modeling. I'm a psychometrist by training. So in a regression line, you don't capitalize on the data. You go for simplicity or parsimony principle, because long-term, the prediction is better. In a given instance, you could capitalize on the data, but your long-term predictions will be really bad. And so in that sense, if you take your life and look at it as a complete life, as opposed to a cross-section or a point in time, you're more successful. If you think of Donald Trump, I mean, because of whatever, he actually lost almost, what I think, an opportunity that was pretty much his. If he had been able to handle it correctly, he could have had it.
It's true.
And so, you know, you lose something really big while trying to feel like I'm this taker, but you lost something big. And that attitude in negotiation matters. And my question to you is, since you've done with so many people, dealt with so many warring factions and parties, how do you learn that? How do you help another person learn and calm down and train themselves to see this bigger picture? How do I find out about my opponent? Because if I'm at a position where, you know, they're not telling me too much, and often happens in negotiation, the tactical aspect of negotiation, you know, you don't want to show your cards. So how do you find out about the opposing party, so to speak?
Well, to me, those are all good questions. So this is simple, but it's not easy. And it takes practice, just like anything, any sport that you do. You know, you're not going to get, you know, it's something it takes constant practice. So going to the balcony, learning to be the observer in the Vedic words there, that takes constant practice, constant attention, focus with the mind, watching your thoughts float by like clouds in the sky, watching your emotions float by like clouds in the sky. And so it takes it. Now, if you can, we have chances every single day to practice. So there's no lack of opportunities to practice. You can practice with every single person. Okay, what can I do? What's my favorite way of going to the balcony? For me, for example, one of my favorite ways of going to the balcony is to go for a walk. You know, if I have a chance, I go for a walk. That clears my mind. I'm in touch with nature. I don't know. I have more of a balanced view, and then I can more instantly understand. So, what is the prize for me? What is truly important here? What is my objective here? Deepest objective in this negotiation? And then, having gone from a balcony perspective, then I can then, having listened to myself, I actually open up mental space to be able to listen to the other. Because to me, negotiation is most fundamentally not about talking, it's about listening. If you observe the behavior of successful negotiators, you find that they listen far more than they talk. Why? Because by listening, not only are they conveying respect, which is to me a kind of foundation for successful negotiation, of seeing the other, valuing the essential human dignity of the other, that if you could do that, but they are also, in listening, trying to understand what that other person really wants. Behind their words, what are they really feeling?
Listening the unspoken.
Saying, but what are they not saying?
Yes.
But you can do that from a balcony perspective, but you can only do that if you've listened to yourself first. Because otherwise, your mind is just raging with all these thoughts and emotions and whatever, and there's no space to truly listen to the other. And so, and they've done experiments with this, but it's if you can listen to yourself, you can then listen to the other. And even if they don't tell you what they want, you can learn to read them. And you can even go through a kind of an experiment of like putting yourself in their shoes. If I were in their shoes, what would I be worried about? You could, like a scientist, you can then say, okay, there's probably like these 3 or 4 things. Treat those not as certainties, but as hypotheses. And then start to, as part of the process of listening, another key tool in negotiation is not making statements, is asking good questions. Learn to ask questions to test out your hypotheses and say, help me understand here. I'd like to meet your needs, you say to the customer. Help me understand more. What are you really concerned about? What are your needs? Is it really cost here? Is it quality? Just keep on probing with questions. Or sometimes people don't want to answer directly. Do it a little more indirectly and say, what would you advise me to do in this situation? Or ask hypothetical questions like, what if we had a magic wand here and we had endless resources? What would you do in this situation? That'll help bring out what they really want. What would nirvana look like for you in this situation? Or sometimes a lot of people like to criticize. So you say, what would be wrong with doing it this way? And then they'll give you all kinds of criticism, but inside the criticism, if you look at it, are pearls that suggest what do they truly value? What are they truly concerned about? So by asking those kinds of questions, it's like with a key in a door. Sometimes you can't open it. You got to jiggle it one way, jiggle it another, and then gradually you find a way, the door opens. And then you can understand the other side. And once you've understood what they're really concerned about, what's their equivalent of freedom was for my friend in that story, then you're much more likely to be able to come up with a solution that works for you and works for them.
And sometimes it could be a face saving that you need to give them. I mean, this is amazing what you just said, listening, because since we talked a little bit about Vedas, fundamentally it's about mastering your mind, controlling it and making it do what it needs to do, what you want it to do. And don't identify yourself so much with your mind. You need to identify yourself, whatever you want to identify, but do not identify yourself with the mind, because then you're letting the horses run wild. You have no reins over them. It's just boom, 5 horses going 5 different directions. And then you're so attached to your outcome, so attached to your desires, you're not paying attention to anything else, because all you say is, I'm ignoring all messages. I'm only focused on what I want. And when you ignore everything, you're going to fail because you're not knowing what they want.
That's absolutely. It's like, a lot of these lessons are actually in the Gita.
Yeah.
Arjuna and Krishna are having this conversation, and there's a lot of, when you're talking, I'm thinking back to that conversation that they used to have. And so it's very true. It's, Einstein once said, the mind is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master.
Yes, absolutely.
That's the key.
I am so glad that I got a chance to talk with you. And while we did not talk about things that I had planned, several of those things, but I think some deep insights emerged from this conversation. And I look forward to talking with you again and hopefully meeting with you sometime. This is wonderful.
I look forward to it very much, Nick, and I wish you and all your viewers, all your readers, much success in getting to yes with yourself so that you can then get to yes with others.